Hi guys, here I am teaching from my bathtub. I have this really nice comfy bathtub, so why not? And I'm also having a glass of wine, which again has been like a life dream of mine to be able to drink and teach at the same time. So hey, quarantining agrees with me. Cheers. Okay, so let's take a few minutes to talk about Theodore Roethke's poem My Papa's Waltz. This is a pretty well anthologized poem. Maybe you've read it before. Theodore Roethke was born in Michigan um, and to a family of German immigrants. His father and his father's brother owned a greenhouse together, and when Theodore was young, he worked in the green shop and helped his father and uncle. And then when he was 14 years old, his father passed away from cancer, and then his uncle committed suicide that same year. So it was really a traumatic and formative year for a young man who was already sort of introverted and maybe a little like on the fringe. Um, Along with being a very successful writer, Retka, like a lot of writers, suffered with his own brand of mental illness and anxiety and things like that. I think his writing was maybe a way of working through some of that. So let's take a look at My Papa's Waltz. First of all, there's the title, and you notice that this poem has much more of a rhyme pattern than a lot of, well, I guess we're really early in the reading the semester, but so I can't say more of a rhyme pattern than most of what we read, but it has a very marked rhyme pattern. And if you are a music person, you might have noticed that it's really the same rhythm as the musical waltz. So it's called My Papa's Waltz, and Papa is sort of a familiar term for a father. It's not father, it's Papa, which is kind of warm and childlike, and a waltz is sort of a nice, intimate dance. So, it starts out with those associations. And then we read the whole poem, and there's still, that. Like, it was this moment between his son and his father. Maybe it was a little rough, but it's kind of a little bedtime ritual, and the kid seemed to enjoy it. At the end, he didn't even want to let go of his father's shirt. First reading, right? The first time you read through it, the title, you have the nice rhythm, then the bouncing up to bed, but maybe you're a little unsettled. I don't know. So then you go back and you read it again. And maybe again, you're just maybe feeling like, I don't know, this everything in this poem doesn't seem to be what it says on the surface of the page. So why is that? And maybe you even did a little bit of research into the poem and read that, this says it's a poem about an abused child. And then you go back and you read it and you're like, well, where is that? Like, nowhere in here does he talk about violence or abuse or fear. How do we get that leap from a son waltzing around the house at bedtime with his father to, assuming that there was violence of some sort in this house? So let's take a look at the poem and break it down a bit. It starts out with the whiskey on your breath could make a small boy dizzy. So first of all, just because dad's having a drink at bedtime doesn't mean he's abusive or alcoholic. I mean, I'm having my drink right here in class today. But, whiskey's a strong drink. It's not like the Bud Light on your breath could make a small boy dizzy. And you gotta drink a lot of whiskey to have breath strong enough to make somebody dizzy. So, again, he's not saying dad was like shit-faced drunk, but we're kind of getting like, dad might have had a little bit too much drink. And this might be sort of a regular occurrence in this household. So dad is had a few drinks, it's after bedtime, it's after dinner, and it's time to get the son to bed. So they're romping around and dancing, and the dancing is because dad's had a lot to drink, kind of wild, and the kid has to like hold on to his dad so he doesn't kind of go flying or fall. It says, but I held on like death, such waltzing was not easy. Again, okay, dad's a little rough, but the term held on like death, there's something a little unsettling about that. There's something a little too wild about the dancing, and they were starting to not maybe feel so good about the situation anyway. We romped until the pan slid from the kitchen shelf. They're dancing through the kitchen, and Mom only makes one brief appearance in this poem. Mom is in the kitchen when they're kind of dancing through there, and again, Dad is so rambunctious that he's knocking things off the counter, and Mom's not happy about it. Mom could not unfrown herself, which is kind of a strange backwards way of saying that she wasn't happy. And that's it. Like, Mom doesn't say anything, but we, when we go back and think about the meanings of this poem, we kind of wonder what Mom's role was in this. If Dad was abusive, was Mom complicit? Was Mom also a victim of this abuse? Was Mom unaware of what was going on? Because she's brought into the poem, so we can't ignore her completely, but all we know is that she's not happy about the dance that's happening in her kitchen. Okay, so then we get into the next stanza, and that's where we really want to pay attention to the difference between connotation and denotation, like we talked about the other day. The words on the page, the actual dictionary definitions, are benign. We're dancing, it's a little rough, time to go to bed, I love you, good night. But the connotation of every word in this poem is so disturbing in a way. And that's why maybe the first time you read it, you didn't necessarily pick up on it, and maybe the second time you just kind of had an uneasy feeling. You're reacting to those connotations in the poem. You're reading the words on the page, and you're noting that nothing really terrible is going on in this poem, but you're not feeling good about the situation. And even a cursory reading of it might make you feel uneasy. But then when you go and read it really carefully and look at the words and say, well, where are those feelings coming from? I think it becomes clear. So it says, the hand that held my wrist was battered on one knuckle. All right, first of all, if you're dancing with somebody, you want them to be holding your hand, right? This is tenderness, this is dancing. The hand that held my wrist, this is an act of aggression and an act of control. If somebody grabs your hand, it feels tender and you feel a loving connection. Somebody grabs your wrist, you instinctively know that you're afraid. Like, you would be afraid if somebody grabbed your wrist, because, like I said, that's aggressive. And so they're dancing, and Dad isn't holding the boy's hand, he is holding his wrist. So just that little detail of Dad's hand sliding a few inches down tells us something about their relationship. And the hand was battered on one knuckle. So, like the father in, my goodness, my brain, too much wine. The father in those winter Sundays who worked every day, and his hands were, rough from working, and we know that Roethke's father worked, in a greenhouse. So sure, his skin, his hands was probably dry, but he uses the word battered. And the connotations of the word battered are pretty clear. We used to use the term to describe abused women and children, battered women, battered children. His knuckles were battered, but the word battered holds a strong connotation of abuse. And then on one knuckle. Again, it says hand, but it doesn't say finger or hand, it says knuckle. And we all know the connotation of knuckle is fist, and the connotation of fist is punch. Right? So, at every step you missed, my right ear scraped a buckle. So again, denotation, sure, the kid is short, he only comes up about waist high on his dad, and when Dad's dancing wildly, the kid's ear is scraping against his dad's belt buckle. But I don't need to tell you the connotation of the word belt buckle, especially when you're talking about a father's belt buckle. When we say Dad had his belt off, kids know they're going to get hit with the belt. I mean, that's a pretty iconic or even archetypal image is the belts that kids would get hit with. And it's passive. It's passive tense. He doesn't say, when you missed a step, your buckle scratched my ear. It's my right ear scraped a buckle. Because everything about this poem, there's no blame at all. To say your belt buckle scratched me would be in some way implying placing some sort of blame or attributing to the father that he hurt the child in some way. By making it passive and just saying my ear scraped a buckle, the father isn't, complicit in this act. It was just an accident that happens. You beat time on my head. Of course, the word beat has another violent connotation, with a palm caked hard by dirt, then waltzed me off to bed, still clinging to your shirt. So at the end of the poem, when you look carefully at the images and the scene that they're really drawing for us, instead of the scene that seems to lie on the surface of the poem, it's not really a portrait of a slightly tipsy dad playfully dancing with his son after dinner. It's the story of a child who loves his father and is a little afraid of his father, and is very most likely abused by his father. It's important to note that in this poem, the speaker is the child. It's not like in those winter Sundays, it's not an adult looking back on childhood. It is the child in that moment, with his papa after dinner. And you might say, well, why, if your father was abusive and you wanted to talk about that in the poem, you want to explore that with language, why cover it up with a waltz and a fun evening? Not fun maybe, but make it seem benign when it wasn't benign. And I think, if you really think about it, how do you think the boy felt about his dad? Does he hate his dad? Was it like, you abused me and I hated you for it? And, it's all very cut and clear in my head how you felt and how I felt about the situation. Obviously not. Obviously the child was conflicted. You've heard that negative attention is better than no attention at all. And those moments with his father, it was an intimate time. It was the time that he spent with his son, for good or for bad. It's not easy for children to make sense of any sort of abuse. It's not easy to take the feelings that, that I enjoyed this time with my dad, that, I did want to spend more time with him. But know, on the other hand, that time was harmful or abusive in some way. So he wrote it like this. He wrote it as a waltz. He wrote it with words that on the surface don't seem to say anything more than this was a nighttime ritual with my dad. But we as readers can see through this and see the conflicted child behind the words, and know that there was more than meets the eye with this poem. And know that the child in this poem, the speaker, his feelings were complicated. Some of it was a fun time, and some of it was, still clinging to my dad's shirt, not wanting it to end. And some of it hurt. And it's all those things, all contained in one really powerful and poignant, multi-layered poem. And I hope you were able to see some of that. So respond to the poem. Did you see an abusive relationship in the poem at all? Or, when I said that, was that the first time you even considered it? What did you think of the child in the poem? What did you think of the mother in the poem? How would the poem be different if the speaker in the poem were an adult now? Roethke obviously wrote the poem as an adult. How would the poem be different if he allowed his own adult voice to narrate this poem, rather than putting himself in the body of that small child who only reached waist high on his father? So leave your comments, leave your thoughts, leave your impressions, and I will be coming to you from another spot in my house soon. See ya.